Welcome, theatrics, one and all, to another edition of my podcast, the Theatric Dyspraxic Show. Today is going to be a little bit different, and we'll be tackling some issues that some may consider controversial. So I just want to put a little disclaimer at the top of the show that if your sensibilities are fragile and you are sensitive to this particular topic, then perhaps it's best that you click away. If you consider yourself a staunch feminist and you're not really open to taking in different ideas or positions, then maybe this isn't really the show for you. But if, however, you are open and want to hear an opposing viewpoint and want to learn a little bit about the other side of something that maybe you don't hear much about, then by all means, sit back and listen. And perhaps you'll find something informative that you didn't know before. Because that's what this is all about. It's to have a constructive, productive discussion. It's not meant to be hateful, but rather to shed a light on an issue that I think largely gets swept under the rug, and that is the problems with radical feminism, specifically modern feminism. Now, I'm not an expert at the subject myself, and I'm not the greatest pundit on political or sociological matters, but I have done my fair share of research, and I have listened to viewpoints on both sides, and I have made my own conclusions to that. And I've also had my own negative experience with feminists in the past, most of whom who have falsely accused me of being a misogynist for being critical of feminism and sometimes criticizing certain aspects of female behavior that I feel like are toxic for society. It's become quite acceptable to talk about toxic masculinity and some of the negative behaviors of certain men, which I think is perfectly fair. But my problem is that in today's society, it's just not balanced. It seems perfectly all right to go after men, but if you make a critical statement on toxic femininity, or even suggest that such a concept exists, then you are labeled a sexist and your point is considered moot. In reality, and in reality, there is a lot to unpack when it comes to these types of issues. And in my goal to be fair to everyone, I try to listen to the voice of the people that it most affects. While these largely affect men, and I can attest to my own experiences with that, they also affect women, probably on a more significant scale. The fact of the matter is that today, more and more women are rejecting feminism, not because they don't feel like they should have the same rights as men. We've long since moved past that aspect of feminism. In today's society, women are given more opportunities than ever and privileges even many men don't have. A lot of feminists deny their own privileges and want to say that men are the only ones who have any sort of privilege at all. Many feminists dismiss significant men's issues in favor of playing the victim and seeming like they're the most oppressed, like it's a competition, which is not only detrimental to men and also promotes misandry, but it also ignores serious issues that they face. But it's also hurtful to women because it paints them all as victims and makes them appear weak, as if they can't be independent. Um, I personally have met many feminists who seem to blame all of their problems on the mythological notion of the patriarchy or toxic masculinity and use that as sort of a blanket enemy that prevents them from being able to achieve their goals, and that it's men who are preventing them from getting ahead rather than taking responsibility for themselves. I am a humanist. I believe in equality for all and believe that for the most part, aside from key biological differences, men and women are largely the same. But having equal opportunity doesn't necessarily yield equal outcome. And part of being equal means having to have equal accountability. We can't talk about the toxic things men do without also talking about the toxic things that women do. And I feel like no one would know more about that themselves than women who have seen for themselves the dangers of radical feminism. So I want to welcome my guest today, one such woman who discusses the issues of feminism. She is known as the Last Unicorn and runs a YouTube channel called Feminism on Trial, where she discusses men's issues and the problems with feminism today. Today, we will discuss these issues in a frank and informal discussion that hopefully will be informative. This is not an attack on anyone, but I think it's important to look at both sides of any issue and to be open minded. Along the way, I'll be talking a little bit about my own experiences with feminists, and I'm sure she will have some stories of her own. So I want to share the stage with my special guest, the Last Unicorn. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Happy to have you.
Wow, that was a That was a terrific intro.
Oh,
I
thank you.
was nodding my head and really, yeah, you hit the nail on the head, I think, in a lot of those ways.
Thank you very
Ooh,
much. Uh,
absolutely.
I think I want to. I guess what
What
we can.
I'd like, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say. And feel free to jump in at anything that you want to say at any point. This is, I want to give you a platform to share your opinions and things that are important to you. But I guess a good place to start
Okay.
is, how do you define feminism, and how do you think it has changed from its inception to today?
Ooh, how do I define feminism? I think that word, feminism, is about as undefinable as any word you could, pull out of a hat. Because from my experience of talking to women, and they're a little more open with me since I am a woman, they don't automatically see me as, you know, the oppressor or what have you. They don't get their defenses up. It seems they all have different definitions of what it means. Um, some, some believe that things should be completely traditional, and if you work, then that's feminist. If you even have a job as a woman, then you're a feminist. Um, there are people who believe that if you think that women should have the right to vote, you're a feminist. So it runs, there is a complete spectrum of defining that term. It really, more than any other word right now, I think it really depends on who you're asking. So you asked me. Well, I'm one of those ones that says that when people talk about first wave feminism, which started in the late 1800s and led to the women's right to vote in 1919, and then subsequent waves, second wave, third wave. Some people say we're in the third wave now or fourth wave, whatever. What I say, and it's extremely unpopular, but what I say is that the first suffragettes in the 1800s, late 1800s, and getting the right to vote in 1919 was the earthquake that created this tsunami and has put us in the predicament we are in today.
I think it is.
So
Oh, go ahead.
I'm technically that far. I'm technically that far. I was just going to clarify that I'm technically that far that I think that things would have been better had we never gotten the right to vote. That's my personal opinion. Not very widely accepted, and I'm fine with that. I'm not expecting for everyone to think that way. The mere thing that I expect, I kind of borrow from Dr. Jordan Peterson in his book 12 Rules for Life. One of the rules is when you're having a conversation with someone, I'm probably butchering a little bit, paraphrasing, but he says, assume that there's something they're going to say that you don't know.
Hmm.
So, what I hope is when I'm talking about feminism at all levels, starting with the suffragettes, maybe something will click.
Well, first of all, I mean, Jordan Peterson, he's a very intelligent person, and I've definitely, seen some of I know he's definitely
Yeah.
been controversial. I don't think he should be considered
Yeah.
controversial, because I think he's just speaking truth, but I guess it's just hard truths for some
Yes.
people. I think it's a good.
Oh, yeah. Well, they say the truth hurts
It does, yes.
for a reason.
And I think you're absolutely right that people do seem to have different ideas of what feminism is. That's
Right.
the first uh, challenge
Right.
that we have when even discussing feminism, is
Right.
that people seem to have
It
different
is.
views of what is considered feminism. I've met women who say feminism is literally women having the same rights, and it's like, okay, I
Yeah.
agree with you, but they hide behind that definition while they demonize men or
Right.
victimize women. Whenever they
Correct.
engage in this toxic behavior,
Right.
they want to go backpedal and say like, "Oh no, though feminism is this," but they don't necessarily practice what
Hmm.
they preach. And one of the important things that
And they
one of the
don't
interesting
understand
things,
how that hurts men.
exactly, and women too. I think it hurts. I think it hurts
It
society in
does.
general. These victim
Yes.
all these
That's what,
victim
yeah, I was going to say
Olympics.
the best way is to work backwards.
Exactly. Um, One of the interesting things that I've heard about the suffragette movement and women getting the right to vote. Um,
Hmm.
what is interesting to me, actually looking into it, is that the vast majority of women didn't back then didn't actually want the right to vote. Um,
Correct.
it was actually sort of a minority group, and it wasn't necessarily the feminists groups that accomplished that. It was a lot of other different groups, and
Correct.
largely it was, I mean, you had to have a majority vote from the Senate or whoever gave the
Hmm.
women the right to vote. So those were the ones that were kind of
Hmm.
decided that women should have the right to vote. But a lot of women didn't want the right to vote
Right.
because be getting the right to vote back then, because men had the right to vote, it came with certain criteria, uh, such as you had to sign up for the
Hmm.
draft to be able to get the right to vote, and a lot of women didn't
Hmm.
want to sign up, have to be forced to sign up for the draft. But
Right.
whenever they were given the right to vote, it didn't come with that stipulation. And today it still is like when
No,
men
it did not.
get the right to vote, whenever men sign up to vote, register to vote, they do have to sign up for the draft, and women don't. And that's a part of
Right.
female privilege that we have, or that they have.
So, yes. So, right there, you have that is proof positive just in that one sentence, and we can find other proof. That is proof that feminists, this is my opinion, were never after equality. Because if they had been, then they would sign up for the draft for the right to vote. But
They were more into
somehow, you know,
equal
right, we want to be
responsibility.
equal. No, you don't. No,
You
you
don't.
don't want to be equal. You're jealous. You're looking at the men. You're like, how come he gets to? It's a very childlike mentality.
Yeah,
How come he gets to do that?
like being a
I want to
child and
do that.
looking
And
at your
so he's
sibling. And
doing, yes. And what yeah. And he's going out to work, busting his rear end, you know, for his family, for their livelihood, for their protection, all of that. And she somehow looks at that and thinks, that looks fun. I want to do that. And I don't think, I don't want to get into conspiracies right now because that's not what we're talking about today. But generally, yes, I agree with you. This did not come from your average American woman, your average woman. It just didn't. They were quite happy in the home. They were quite happy raising the children and doing what they're very talented at. And, as the feminists talk about second wave, third wave, when women started getting into the workforce, with World War II, they quote unquote had to replace the men. And then they were getting into the workforce more in the 70s. They they just wanted to have what they thought men had, as if because you don't have it, it must be something good. And
right.
from what I've observed in men, work is a necessity. Work is something you do. It's a means to an end. So
Mm.
you work to, gain money and get a house, take care of yourself. It's not an end into itself. Men don't go to work for fulfillment.
Unless they're doing
It's
something
a
they really
necessity.
are
Men
passionate about, but I
they
know what you mean.
really love. That's true, but that's more of an example. That's not the everyday, okay, I'm home from work, I got to wake up in the morning. Um Generally most men, if they could retire right now from their 9 to 5s, they would.
Oh yeah.
So somewhere along the line, something, someone, a movement we'll call them the movement feminism, tricked women into thinking that it was great to be in the workforce and oppressive to be at home, taking care of the home, taking care of the children, perhaps volunteering in your community, and having your husband's supper on the table when he gets home.
And honestly, like if
That was somehow twisted to oppression.
one of the things, and the thing is, I mean, I'm all about individual freedoms and choices. Like if people want, like if a woman wants to work, by all means. But I don't think anyone should be pressured
All
to
power
live
to.
a certain way.
Correct. Me too. Actually, me too. People might get the wrong idea, as they often do, and think that I'm trying to tell people how to live their lives. That is not me.
That's the
I am
podcast.
I love freedom. So go ahead and get a job, and woman, and if you like it, great. But here's where I have a problem: when they have children and they work. That's when I really have an issue, because children, especially young children, cannot advocate for themselves. So that's when I get a little pushier in my speech about what I think people should and shouldn't do. And
Mhm.
what I think that women should not do is abandon their children in daycare. And yes, I use the word abandoned.
I think I think there's absolutely I think there should at least be one parent. It's hard. It's a really difficult subject because a lot of times, especially in America today, it is difficult to have a household
Mhm.
and to raise children with only one income.
Right,
But I do think that
right.
it is beneficial, at least, whether it's maybe the woman is working and the husband's a stay-at-home husband. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Some people might think that
Well, she's
there is
better
a problem
suited.
with that, but
She's better suited biologically and mentally. The female is, there are exceptions and outliers, of course, and that's what everyone points to. But the female is better suited to looking after the young children, because of feminine qualities like expressiveness, like nurturance. All of those feminine qualities lend us to be a little better at it. Same as if we were going to say, well, which one of us should be the firefighter? Well,
right.
the man's skills lend him more to that. And feminists hate that. They hate it when you say, hey, men are better at this and women are better at this, unless they're saying women are better at something that men are good at.
Right. And it's kind of like when you look at animals, I mean, the ones that are
Mm-hmm.
more nurturing, the ones that until they like the puppies, until they are old enough to kind of fend for themselves, they latch on to the mother. They kind of have to.
Right.
It's the biological program.
That's right.
And female, animals like
That's right.
dogs and stuff, that's their instinct is to nurture the kids and
That's
to
right.
bring them up. And the father's out there, to kind of
Right.
be the protector. And that's kind
Hunting, protecting.
the
Correct.
natural thing. And obviously,
Uh-huh.
yeah, you're right. There are exceptions, and I think it's perfectly okay if sometimes even if the roles are reversed, it all depends on the people involved and their specific personalities.
Sure.
And I don't necessarily believe
Sure. Of
specifically
course.
that there should necessarily be certain gender roles, but you can't really argue with the averages, and that is the average, and there's nothing wrong. That's an issue that a lot of feminists seem to shame women. I've heard many women say this. Many of the women who are kind of
Mhm.
speak out against feminism, they've talked about their experiences being shamed by feminists for deciding to go the traditional
Yes.
route and be a stay-at-home mom and to be
Yes.
like the one that cooks and
Mhm.
things like that. If that's her choice,
Mhm.
then why
Mhm.
not?
Right. Yeah. It's all about, you can do whatever you want until you say, well, what I want to do is stay home and serve my husband.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, I'm engaged to be married. We know exactly how
Congratulations.
we want things to work. Thank you. He will be the leader of our household. And by leader of our household, um, we're both Christian. So a lot of what I say comes from that, but I also derive it from biology as well, like the male female roles. I mean, you wouldn't tell that to some chimpanzees or gorillas. Stop with your roles are silly. But with my choice, yes, I have to hide my choice of deferring to my future husband and submitting to him. All of that is like dirty language to the
Yeah.
feminists. And all they want to do is rescue me because clearly I'm suffering from Stockholm syndrome
Yeah,
or
you're a
I'm
slave.
brainwashed. Right. Exactly. And I'm like, look, if you knew me for half a second, you would know that is the farthest thing from the truth. I'm quite a firecracker. I have tons of opinions. I have opinions about my opinions. And I've made a clear choice. I I know he is smarter than me in a lot of ways. And I know that I'm more talented than he is in other ways. So
Absolutely.
he's good to lead us financially. And I'm using this, my personal example, because I think it's better than making a broad statement or sounding like I'm telling people what they should do, just
Right.
to say what I'm doing.
Different things
And
work for different people.
to let, right. And to let him lead, I don't find that as a threat. And the thing is when women hear that, oh, you're just gonna let him lead and you're gonna submit to him and obey him, he must be, horrible and controlling and abusive. Not at all. He adores me and he listens to me. And his number one concern, day and night, is my welfare and am I protected? Am I provided for now and into the future? That is why he works constantly. It's not for him, it's for us as a family. And,
Right.
you know, I had to shed the last remnants of feminism off of myself to be able to see the beauty in this, to see how symbiotic and balanced and complementary it is.
And that's wonderful. And there's a reason why those a lot of those traditional marriages where it is kind of like that, those are kind of the roles and you have those clear roles. There's a reason
Yes,
why those have worked for
right.
centuries, And
That's right.
if you have
It's
a
right. And it's
different way
not
that's
because women were
unconventional.
trapped and couldn't get out.
Yeah, I mean, really, I mean, when you even look into women historically, they may have had certain roles and they may have, they may not have had certain rights at the time that maybe they do now. But it doesn't mean that they were
Mhm.
all slaves. It doesn't mean that they were all
No,
captives. They made the choices
no, and that's the narrative they push.
because
They
men are
push
all
that
evil.
narrative
We're all
on.
evil. We just want to control women.
Right. You're all evil. Right. And my
And you're
response
all
to that
weak.
is if that were true, right? If that were true, if men were all, potential rapists and controlling and would beat their wives if there were no, laws to prevent that. That's not true at all. If that were true, I don't think our species would be, you know, we wouldn't have survived as a species. That's not good evolution. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and
Um,
yeah.
it's just not. So it's, in my opinion, that's a giant lie. It's a giant lie to teach women and girls, younger girls, that be careful because men are predators. And they teach us from the beginning men are predators and you're the victim. So you're always primed as a little girl growing up, and I am 43. So this tells you this has been going on for a long time. So, even as a kid, it's very subtle. It's in movies, it's on commercials. And then when the littlest thing happens to you in school, where maybe a little boy, you know, a kid
Easy.
in junior high, whatever, pulled your braid, you're like, there it is.
It's the patriarchy at work.
Because one thing happened. Right, exactly. You get told, oh, watch out for this, watch out for that. You got to fight, keep fighting, fighting. They don't say what they're fighting for specifically. Like, what are we fighting for? We're already overprivileged. It's way more female privilege than there is male privilege. We already talked about the draft, you know,
And I'm sure there's
but
a lot of other things we could
you,
talk
you,
about. I mean, just from
sure,
this
you get
conversation alone,
primed.
I'm thinking of different avenues that we could go down. It's even hard to choose a topic at this point.
Right? It's huge. It's absolutely huge. Um, women, I mean, look at, okay, the glaring, elephant in the room is how men are treated in family court.
Oh yes.
And I was, I am blessed to have a fiance that said, you're going to watch the red pill. I want you to watch the red pill, do it now. And I'm laughing because he sounds like that, but it's not supposed to be like serious, like he's actually like ordering me. But
Right.
anyway, I watched the red pill. I watched the red pill and I saw those men whose children were just taken from them.
I'm sorry.
And
I'm not totally familiar with what I've heard of the concept of the red pill, but it sounds like you're referring to maybe a documentary or something.
oh, okay. Well, there's a movie. I'm so sorry.
No, no, you're fine.
Yes, there's a documentary called The Red Pill. I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. I'm her name escapes me right now. Well, she was a feminist at the time, and she was going to get to the bottom of all of this sort of anti-feminism, feminism, what's it all about? So she did a documentary and she interviewed, you know, some men's rights activists. She interviewed some feminists. It was a very well put together documentary. And at the end of it, she was no longer a feminist. It was one of those things that she went out to like figure out feminism and almost went out to prove that the men were making a mountain out of a molehill. And she came away realizing the complete opposite. So, one of the things highlighted in that documentary is how slanted the family court system is in the woman's favor, specifically about giving her custody of the children and making, his visitation and his rights to the children extremely conditional and fluid. And she can accuse him of anything, just pull it out of the sky. And the judge will give it credence. It's a terrible thing that's going on in our country right now, and I'm still learning more about it. But
Well,
it's
not
it's
just
funny
family
because there are
court,
men's
but
rights activists. Oh no, not just family court. No,
in
of course. I mean,
general. I
men's and women's sentences for the same crime are completely different.
mean,
And the other thing is when a woman, this is also rampant, when a female teacher, has inappropriate relations, I'm keeping it very PC here, when she has inappropriate relations with a male student, it's practically a slap on the wrist
people
compared
glorify it.
to
They say,
when
"Oh,
a
he's
male
lucky."
teacher, right? Oh, yeah, it's like, I wish I had a teacher like that when I was in ninth grade or whatever. And it's like, no, that's abuse. Did you know that the French Prime Minister Macron is married to his former teacher slash abuser?
Jeez.
That is a fact. Everyone can Google it. It's probably erased by now, but it's true. She was his teacher. They began a relationship back then. They kind of deny it, but it's well known, and they are married now. That is the First Lady of France.
Just imagine if the roles were
So you cannot
reversed.
tell me. Right? Right. So you cannot tell me that this is all about making things equal. Well, if we're going to make things equal, ladies, we got to take some crap away from you. And you got to sign up for the draft
Exactly. It's these double
because
standards. They want
they,
equality. They want the
mhm,
privileges, but none of the disadvantages. And that's the problem.
none of the
Lots of politics.
disadvantages. And none of the responsibility or accountability.
Exactly.
And here's the thing. This is what I think. And honestly, I listen to Dr. Jordan Peterson a lot. I think his mind is brilliant, and
It's
I
brilliant.
don't agree with everything because obviously
Yeah.
he believes in, feminism and stuff. But when there's truth, not to the weird claims they make that are not true.
Hmm.
But he will outright tell people about the pay gap and how it is it's not real.
Right.
The only reason women supposedly make less than men for quote doing the same job, first of all,
That's
it's
not
not
what it
doing the
is.
same job.
That's
It's
not
that
even what the pay gap is.
no,
It has
men go
nothing to do with doing the same job.
no, has nothing to do with it at all. Men go into fields that tend to be higher paying. Men spend longer hours at work. Men don't take maternity leave. So, of course, the statistics are going to show that men make more money than women. Also, women do tend to be more agreeable. Personally, I take it as a compliment when someone tells me I'm agreeable. Doesn't mean I'm stupid. Doesn't mean any of that. You know what it means? It means I'm not a brat,
What's
since we're keeping
what's
it clean.
wrong with being
Um,
agreeable?
Nothing is, I mean, absolutely nothing is wrong, but the feminists would equate that to weakness. Did you ever notice, like, they want the women going out there, nah, 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 like that, and they say that's strength, and I'm like, no, that's obnoxiousness.
It's entitlement.
And men are, it's entitlement, it's a tantrum, and I'm going to do it until I get what I want, and that means I'm strong. And they start it in little girls,
Like
you know,
Angelica and Rugrats.
little things that, yeah, yeah, and little girl power, and calling little girls sassy. I'm sorry, but when I was growing up, if I was sassy to my parents, that was not cute. They didn't think that was cute. They shut that down right away because
Um,
it's just being obnoxious. But
and
men know how to advocate for themselves in a way that they can say, look, I want to get paid what I'm worth. I'm interested in this higher position, etc. Whereas women will just kind of wait for somebody to come along and give them a higher position. And if they don't, then it's oppression and they're angry because they were looked over or something like that. Well, you didn't advocate for yourself.
yeah, you didn't speak up.
It's
You
not
didn't.
in our nature to do that. Right. And when we do speak up, we do it, we don't generally know how to do it in a civilized way because we end up just kind of throwing a little fit.
It becomes more
Like, well,
hostile.
how come he had? Yes, absolutely.
Well, it's kind of like
Absolutely. And
in
now I don't want to bash women. I love women. Women are wonderful and we have lots of talents. The problem is that feminism is saying those aren't talents, those are weaknesses, and they're not as important as what men do. Yes, they are. They are just as, when a woman is in the home raising her children, that is just as important as what the man is doing outside of the home. Think about it. You're raising the next generation. You're shaping their worldviews. You're teaching them manners. You're teaching them right from wrong. You're teaching them, whether you're religious or not, you're teaching them to respect other people's opinions, etc. And now think back to 2020 and all of the civil unrest. I looked at that and in my head, I said, well, this looks like a lot of kids who were raised in daycare because you don't learn that stuff in daycare. In daycare, it's like survival of the fittest. It's Lord of the Flies. When you're like got a bunch of 5 and 6 year olds in daycare and how many adults to that many kids, kids are coming home with bites, scratches, you know, that's not how children were. It's not the ideal way for a child to be raised.
well, it's
And I
also
know
like
you said earlier,
yes.
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's
I was
almost
just
like
gonna
people say that it's whenever somebody says, "Oh, you need to have manners," like they say that to a girl, they almost take it as if
Yeah.
you're trying to mansplain, or if it's from another woman, it's like you're trying to oppress me and stuff, like as if you're saying be more ladylike.
Right.
It's like no, there's nothing wrong with being ladylike, and there's nothing wrong with having manners.
Boom. Boom. You just hit the nail on the head again. Feminists hate women more than anybody else because of saying act ladylike and being ladylike is bad, and saying the things that women are the best at is oppressive and unimportant and weak. It's it's the feminists who hate women. Feminists are the biggest misogynists out there.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I see a lot of
They
it.
are the ones, they're putting kids in daycare. So therefore, the next generation, the last couple of generations, basically grew up in daycare or latchkey kids just coming home with nobody home. You know, your kids need you to raise them. It is not the school's responsibility to teach your children please and thank you and how to eat with a knife and fork and how to hold a conversation. All of those things. We have we have a couple generations younger than myself that you can barely hold a conversation with, and they don't understand how to handle other, opposing viewpoints. Opposing viewpoints are assault. And my point is that all of this happened the way that these last generations think and the way they're dysfunctional, as I just described. The reason we have these dysfunctional people is because we have had such a jump in single motherhood since 1970. And obviously it went up like, the graph was just a nearly straight up. So the more kids are raised out, away from their mother in daycare or by the television, what have you, the higher, oh my gosh, all the dysfunctionality. Not to mention when no fault divorce was enacted for the first time in the state of California in 1969 and was later, you know, um, adopted by all of the states with no fault divorce. It sounds good. It sounds like, oh, if I'm, in a bad relationship, I can get out because,
Right.
men are probably beating, we have to get out.
And you don't have to
And all
prove
it did
that
was
that's
make
going
there
on.
no accountability.
Right.
And it made it easy to break up. And you put that together with the lack, since nobody's allowed to shame anybody for anything, suddenly shame is a bad thing. Um, Single motherhood is so prevalent, and that is also why we have a couple generations, the young millennials and Gen Z right behind them, so many raised by single mothers who would say, well, I had to work because I had to support my child. Yeah, yeah, you did have to, but you didn't have to make the bad decision in the first place to, you know, do the deed that got you that way. But they
Mhm.
always act like they just caught it. Like, oh, I caught pregnancy. They didn't do anything for it to happen. Just, it was like COVID. They just caught it.
And obviously, it is a case by
And
case
they're
thing.
victims
I mean, I
too.
know female, like
Of
single mothers,
course.
and I don't want to say they don't do a good job raising their kids and stuff. Although most of the single mothers that I know who do a good job, they tend to they spend more time with their child. Like they still raise their child. Like the ones that I know, they don't just like abandon them, or and obviously there's different circumstances
What do
for why
they
people end up in that position. And
Right, but what do they do with them when they're infants and they have to go back to work?
well, the ones that
Who
I know,
takes care
they
of those
tend to
infants when
rely
they're
on other
when
people,
they can't go
like
back?
a parent or something. They might live with their parents or things like that, but it's not always the
That is the best way. No, it's usually not. It's usually not because most people don't live near their extended family anymore. the Industrial Revolution helped move that along, where we don't live near our grandparents, parents, cousins, aunts, uncles, etc. Obviously, it's more common to in the South and the Midwest to live near your people.
Hmm.
But when you live out on the West Coast, so many people are not from here. They're transplants.
Hmm.
And so yeah, they've moved away from that support system. It's very different if you're a single mother, and I'm speaking psychologically for the child. It's very different if you have an infant who already knows, its grandparent is familiar with its grandparent, and then you go to work while grandma takes care of infant. Much different situation. Infant does not think it's abandoned. In the first 2 years of life, when the mother leaves the child's sight, the infant does not understand that the mother is ever coming back.
Right.
This is well documented. I think Jean Piaget was one of the first people to do the staging of childhood. But that's pretty much agreed upon. So if you have, say you were lucky and you got a month of maternity leave, and your infant is you're a month old, and you take it to a daycare, it's never been there, it doesn't know anybody, smells weird, and you leave it, that creates trauma in the brain of that human that can last the rest of their lives. And nobody is talking about it
It's
because we're
subconscious.
too
It's all
busy
about the
saying, yeah,
the
yes, we're too busy
bond
saying
with
single
the
mom
mother and
heroes.
child is the most. It's
Right.
so important. It's not just
Correct.
being sustained and being fed and all that kind of stuff. You need that
No,
bond with
no.
the mother and child.
You need that young infant needs consistency, needs to know there's mom, there's mom, there's mom, because it's learning. It's learning all the time. And if it learns when mom drops it off in daycare, it learns every single day that the mom drops it off, mom abandons me. That's so hard to take, I know. No one ever wants to hear me say this because, well, what is a single mother supposed to do? Close her legs until she's married. I know. Oh my gosh, you're a Puritan. Well, you know, you don't get everything you want. Well, he's hot. Well, I'm sorry. Every time you engage in a sexual encounter, you are risking getting pregnant. And if a baby comes out of that, from some guy you met at a club, since now it's supposed to be the third date you're supposed to give it up, uh, what are you going to do? Now you've just brought a life into this world and you're responsible for it. And you're like, but I have to work because I'm a single mom. And it's just, and you, like I said, you can't go backwards. What do you do?
Right. I think it is
We
important.
have to be honest.
It's definitely important to know the risks before you engage in certain behaviors and to make sure that you're responsible.
Yes.
And if you want to do that, I'm all
Yes.
about being liberated. And if you want to if you want to engage in sexual encounters with people, you got to make sure that you understand the risks, what could happen. And I'm just gonna say, like,
Yep.
because this leads to an interesting story that I got into a bit of an argument with recently with a couple of feminists. So I'm sure, and this is probably,
Mhm.
I'm guessing this is going to be something that you and I probably definitely have a difference in opinion on. But I still think that what
Okay.
was saying is, I think you'll still kind of understand my point. So I'm pro-choice personally, and I have my reasons for that.
Mhm.
But there are certain things that I definitely have a problem with that I see on many people, specifically feminists who are
Mhm.
pro-choice, because
Mhm.
regardless of what you're doing, regardless of how you view it, if you view it as a necessary evil or you view it as something that people should have a right to do, um, it is still taking a life. And there are some people on the pro-choice side that seem to deny that. They seem to act like it's not taking a life. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
life. And it's like, well, it is a life. It is a living organism. And
Mm-hmm.
whenever you remove whenever cause the cessation of that living organism to come into existence, then you are
Mm-hmm.
taking a life. And basically, I've seen people who seem to not only are they pro, because I'm pro-choice, but I'm not pro-abortion. But there are people that I see that are literally like
I see.
pro-abortion. They like glorify it. They view it as, I've heard feminists say that
Yeah.
getting an abortion is empowering. And I said, I don't see anything empowering
Right.
about that. I don't
Yeah.
see any, I don't, it's not something to celebrate. I don't
Mhm.
necessarily think someone should feel ashamed of it. I mean, I can understand why someone would, but I don't want to say anything about how somebody should feel. But I definitely don't think that they should feel good about it or to view it as if it's, as to celebrate it. And I was called a misogynist.
Right.
Of course, I had the people saying what people always say to men when they talk
And
about
you were
women.
pro-choice.
They were always like, no vagina, no opinion. They say things like that as if
Yes.
being a man, it
Yes.
automatically
Yes.
disqualifies me
I was
from having
waiting.
any
Yeah.
views on that kind of thing. And it's just like ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. I knew you were going to say, the whole, yeah, no opinion thing. Well, abortion is women dodging accountability and responsibility. And they've justified it by creating their own little science where they say it's a cluster of cells. Well, so am I, and so's my dog, and
Yeah,
so are you.
that's how it
We're
starts.
all
The
cluster
potential. It's
cells.
still a human
Right.
being. I think you
Yeah,
can.
just like I
It's hard
am and
to.
you are, and they not well, my dog's not a human being, but yeah,
It's a
just it's
really
a cluster of
difficult.
cells, sure. Yeah.
It's a subject that I think is really hard to properly debate just because like for me, I hear good points and bad points on both sides. And I feel like I see from both sides, it's kind of like they kind of simplify it, like say it was like, oh, it's murder and on that kind of stuff. And then the other side is just like, well, you're misogynistic because you don't believe that women should have autonomy for their, but it's just really
They
hard
should
because
have
it's all
autonomy,
about
but so should that baby.
right.
And there you go.
But
My body, yeah, but you have another body inside of you,
yeah.
and your decisions put it there. But what about my schooling and how will I go on? And oh, they care about the babies and they don't want them aborted, but they don't care about when they're born because society's supposed to pay for it all. Society's always supposed to pay for people's bad decisions.
Right.
And so I clearly am anti-abortion,
Right.
um, because I'm pro autonomy for the living human inside that woman.
And I don't necessarily disagree with
It
you.
has
And I'm
its
not going to go into
own
my
DNA.
why I'm pro-choice.
Yeah,
My reasons, which I won't get into, but my reasons for being pro-choice is not a morality issue. For me, it's more
right.
about what I feel is pragmatic, and more about sort of like, what happens whenever you outlaw abortion. And that's definitely a debatable thing, but that's not, I don't think this is the platform for that. But
No,
I wanted,
we can have another discussion about that another time. But it
right.
is something that the feminists use. They will go to it and they will talk about it and have their signs and all their marches. And I just looking at it like, what are you talking about? It's legal. What are you protesting?
Yeah, right. It's
It's
like,
legal.
I mean,
What kind of rights are you looking for? Like you have them all and you have more. What are you? We got to keep fighting for women. What? I
and yet,
don't, and
and
they
yet they'll
don't
never,
say specifics.
they never talk about men's reproductive rights either. Men don't really have, in many
Oh.
cases, they don't have reproductive rights. A man, and here's another thing I think,
Mhm.
if you're gonna make it, if you're gonna say it's okay to get rid of a life and to have an abortion and things like that, run away
Mhm.
from responsibility, then you should also make it
Mhm.
okay for a guy to decide not to be involved if you decide to have the child. If he's just doesn't want,
Absolutely.
and I think people, if, like, he shouldn't have to bear the
Absolutely.
financial burden, if he didn't
Nope.
choose to have the.
Because if she can choose to kill it, then he should be able to choose to not own it either. And therefore, she can run from her responsibility, then he should be able to run from his. Absolutely.
Eye for an eye, but that's the double standard that people don't. Like, I'm the kind of person
Sure.
that I
Yep.
always, when I
All
look
about
at these
her.
types of things, I'm always like, well, think about it the other way. You know, think about if you reverse it. It's like I
Yes.
saw a video recently that was like all these like African American people talking about white people and just saying all these horrible things about white people.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, if you reverse that, it
Hmm.
would be racism. I
Right.
mean, it would be horrible.
Oh,
There would be
exactly.
riots and stuff. And it's just like,
Yes.
it's
It's
those
the
double
true, it's
standards.
so true. And it's true sexism.
It's hypocrisy.
You
That's the
know,
biggest thing that I have a problem with
it,
is this
it is.
hypocrisy. They think,
Absolutely. A
okay,
woman, yeah, a woman can, walk up and like, punch her husband in the shoulder or whatever. He can't do that. Like, there's more domestic violence coming from women than there is coming from men.
yeah, and
Men, on average, do not report it. They don't report it because when the police show up at your house and it's a domestic violence call, they assume it's the man and he's at risk,
or he's
of
weak.
getting
He's
taken down
weak
by the police.
if he's being hurt by the
He's
woman,
weak.
he's
Yeah.
he's weak. It's the same thing with male
Right.
sexual assault. That's another thing. And feminists lie about the
Exactly.
statistics about sexual assault. I've heard women say 1 in 5 women have
Yeah.
been a victim of sexual assault, but they don't understand where that came from. That statistic is outdated and it's false because it comes from a study
Yeah.
in the 1970s that they did on college campuses where they basically interviewed all these
Hmm.
different women and every little thing was
Hmm.
written down as rape, basically. So they came up with
Yeah.
this
I was
statistic,
gonna
and it was a
say
feminist group, journal or whatever
that.
that did that study, that survey, where they came to that conclusion that it was 1 in 5 women. And they did another one, a more unbiased one, in 2014,
Mhm.
where it said 1 in 53 women have been victims of sexual assault and 1 in 71 men. So obviously, women are more often the victims of sexual assault, but that kind of goes by biology too, because men are typically stronger than women and they're typically more aggressive as well. So there's a reason why men are usually,
Right.
the ones, but it is closer than we act like it is. And that might not even be an accurate summation because a lot of men
Right.
will not admit if they've been sexually assaulted.
Oh, sure. Yeah, they men are not inherently um going to say that they are victims. It's not in their character to present themselves as a victim. Biologically and evolutionarily speaking, if a male were to show himself as a victim, well, that's a weakness and that's dangerous.
Mhm.
Just biologically, that's how the brain works in a man.
And also, if you talk about
Because
the reasons, like I've a good example. So I'll tell a little bit of a story that happened online a few weeks ago. A friend of mine posted something, and she's one of those feminists, and one of the weird things that I find from some feminists who have been victims of sexual assault is they seem to love to shoehorn that experience into every conversation, as they use it almost like a crutch,
mhm,
that their instance of sexual assault.
yeah.
And look, if you've been a victim of sexual assault, my heart goes out to you. It's a horrible experience. I haven't experienced it. I've had a few close calls with some like homosexual men and
Mhm,
things like that, but luckily I've been
mhm.
able to
Yeah.
get out of it. But I definitely could have been. But it's a horrible thing when it happens to people. But you don't want to use that as a crutch, and you don't want to have this bitterness
Yeah.
because of it, um, where you basically blame
Yep.
all men. And she says something along the lines of, I would love to go take a hike somewhere, go to like a public park without worrying about being sexually assaulted or something like that. And I, of course, wanted to be a little bit of a smartass, and I put a comment that said, "Oh, I go hiking in this park near me all the time, and it seems pretty safe, and everybody seems to have a good time." And then all of a sudden, all of these feminist
Mm-hmm.
friends of hers were coming out saying, you don't understand what it's like every day as a woman. You can't go anywhere without worrying about men. I get
Oh,
harassed everywhere I go. So she's like, I got harassed at the laundromat by a guy, and I asked her what happened, and she said, I told you
yes.
I got harassed by a guy at the laundromat. I said, no, no, no. I'm asking, what did the guy do? What did he say? And she goes, that's none of your
Yeah.
business. And it's like, you can't even
Ha. That's
question.
yeah. Oh.
You can't even ask
Oh.
questions. It's
That's
like,
because
what happened? Even with
everything a
cases of
guy
assault.
does is wrong.
Yes. I've had it happen to me. I've had people. I have never been
Okay.
accused of sexually assaulting somebody, thank God. Cross fingers,
Yeah.
but I have definitely been accused of asserting dominance or harassing. Not anything too major where I got in like legal trouble, but I definitely
Mm-hmm.
have had people say that I've made them uncomfortable by simply being polite, or just talking to a woman sometimes. And that, to me, that's a big issue, I think, that came out of the Me Too movement. I think
Yes.
that hurt both men and women, and it speaks to a larger problem, because it's like you mentioned
Mhm.
earlier about women are basically kind of molded into viewing men as predators and themselves as victims.
Mhm.
And they also, our society seems to also mold men into feeling guilty about things and feeling like they can't really be themselves around women, because every little thing that they do is going to be taken
Right.
away that they don't intend, and they're going to be
Right.
treated as if they did something wrong, even if they were
Right.
polite, even if they were nice. I mean, I would love to, even if I'm not attracted to a woman, or I'm not trying to get something, like whenever I talk to even when I talk to women, my goal isn't to get them in bed. And a lot of guys, that is their goal, and that's fine. That's what they want to do. That's not my main priority. I like having a connection with someone, even if it's platonic. I just love to be able to talk to people.
Mhm.
So I would love to go into like a
Mhm.
bar, go somewhere where I could have a conversation with somebody and not feel like I have to walk on eggshells just because I'm a man. And
Yeah.
I've had many women, like, even if you ask them for their number, they act like you did something terrible. And it's like, okay, if you're not interested, then you're not interested. I can take rejection. I could take no for an answer. Um, and if you want to put me in the
Mhm.
friend zone, that's fine. I don't even really believe necessarily, like, when people talk about the friend zone, it's like, I mean, even just be a friend is good enough. I mean, even to be considered a friend is there's definitely some good things in that. I don't know why the friend zone is such a terrible thing. I mean, I get the frustration if you
I
want
can
to
tell
be
you.
something more.
I know why. I have something to say about the friend zone because with a lot of women, when you're friend zoned, you're a backup. So
Mm,
and you become her. It's an off color term. I didn't come up with it. It's from probably some MGTOW circles and some men's men on the web, but you become her emotional tampon. She's using you, to cry to and all of this. You're useful to her in that way. And she goes back and she, you know, screws the bad boy.
right. Well,
And
that's
so it
just
is
shows that guys
insulting to
guys
the
shouldn't be
person.
simps and
Yeah,
but allow themselves to be in that position. And
right.
I've kind of been like that myself. One of the things, um, and I okay, so here's one little bit of a story that happened when I was 18, and I did something wrong, and I've tried to apologize for it, and I've regretted it ever since. But I did call a woman, a girl, the C word when I was 18.
Hmm.
And the
Okay.
reason I did was because we were
Hmm.
friends for about a year, and I noticed that every single time she was single, she would give me the time of day. She would always
Mhm.
message me. She would call me. We would talk, and she would
Yep,
always,
yep.
kind of have this emotional investment with me. But she never wanted to date me. She didn't want to be with me. But
Yep.
anytime she had a boyfriend,
Right.
it was like I didn't even exist. I didn't
Okay.
matter. And one time
Yeah.
she was having a fight with her boyfriend, and she decided to message me just out of the blue to complain about him. And I
Mhm.
when she ended up towards the end of our friendship, she got with someone new, and she was so we had I have mental health issues. I've had, and I'm open about it. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong
Mhm.
with that. I understand why some people don't. But anyway, she had issues herself, like with anxiety and things like that. And I was having
Mhm.
a hard time. And I remember her posting something online that was just like criticizing people with depression. Like, don't you understand how wonderful life is? And I basically like criticized
Oh.
those comments, and she like unfriended me, and I messaged her asking her why, and she like blocked me, and I got furious, and I had two Facebook accounts for different reasons, and I went on the other one and I sent her a message, called her the C word,
Mhm.
and I regret it. It's definitely wasn't uh, it definitely wasn't mature of me to do that, and I've regretted it ever since. And I
Sure.
doubt she would ever hear this, but I apologize. And it's not because I don't. I think that it's
Right.
horrible, like reprehensible, to call someone the c word. If somebody's being one, then whatever. But it just wasn't right
Well, yeah,
for me to
I
do
mean,
that.
you
But it
didn't
also
think to her
wasn't right.
level, and you're young, and now you realize that that's not the way to handle it, and you should have been better than that, what have you. But everything, she was doing, the way she was using you was wrong, and she got called out on it and had a tantrum.
Hmm.
But if you notice, there are a lot of females out there that just look at men as utilitarian. This is the guy I screw. In the future, there will be a guy I marry who will have the big house and it'll look good on Facebook. Then here's the guy that I talk to and he kind of sort of has a crush on me, but I'm never going to date him. So, but it makes me feel good and validates me and boosts my ego. And then I've got all my little admirers on Facebook.
Yes.
They're all serving a purpose. There's another name for that. It's called a narcissist.
Yes.
That's narcissistic behavior to have a
Also,
use for every person that you know, including your child.
yes, absolutely.
Because I have a problem with women having children as if it's an accessory.
Oh, those. Yeah, that's kind
That's
of like the women, like some of the Hollywood moms that turn their kids into child stars.
uh-huh.
But I want to bring up an interesting
Absolutely.
point. Um, Men often are told that they objectify women, but what you were just talking about kind of proves that yes, men do at times objectify women, although most of the times when they do that, it's women who objectify themselves, like the women who post slutty,
Mhm.
their OnlyFans type stuff,
Yeah.
like you're going to objectify yourself, then people are going to objectify you. But don't say that women don't do the same to men, because first of all, they do objectify them in the same way, but they also objectify them in a different way,
Hmm.
because you treat the men who want
Sure.
to give you everything, and this is also a criticism of certain men too, but
Hmm.
whenever you objectify a guy, by you basically treat him like your piggy bank, or treat him like your car, your own
Hmm.
transport service. A guy who's
Yep.
going to take you everywhere, a guy who's going to shower you in all these things, and you don't have to do anything in return, but you're going to use the guy, you're going to string him
Right.
along. That is
Sure.
objectifying men, I feel like, whenever there's women who do that. And that's part
It
of
is.
female privilege, that
It
you can do
absolutely
that.
is. And you've just made me think of something actually that I never thought of before, which I love. And I think that that's the mark of a good conversation. But here's the thing. Okay, so supposedly men objectify women based on their looks, and women objectify men based on their bank account, money, that kind of thing, right? So that's what we've established. That's what we both do as when we're, not at our best as men and women. But isn't it funny that that's just an extension of our instinct to survive? It is a perversion of what we're supposed to be doing. Men are supposed to look at women and judge them on their beauty for a couple of reasons.
Hmm.
Women should look fertile. I mean, that's what men are attracted to. It's
Absolutely.
biological. So men, it's not something men can really control. They see it and they cannot turn it off.
Right. Well, believe me.
They observe women and I know. And sometimes I know you guys would if you could, but you can't. It is
Yeah.
inherent. I've learned this from my
Well,
fiance.
it's
So
just
much
like
of this
the
that I
women
have
being
learned
more
from
emotional during their
looking
menstrual
through.
cycle. We know that they can't help that, that sometimes their emotions
Right.
get stronger. So, eye for an
They
eye. There's
are. Yeah.
biological things that,
Yeah. There are biological things. And women judging men by their bank accounts, that's a perversion of back, say, the early 1800s of women with the help of their, father choosing a man who could take care of her.
yeah,
So
they're providing.
those were good things in the right context, but they have been perverted. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's feminism that perverted it, because feminism is what I think has broken down the nuclear family more than any other force.
Uh-huh. I
Because you get women out to vote and then they work and then they don't need men anymore. Well, now you have men and women in a household competing with each other at the same thing. You can't have two captains of one ship.
right.
It doesn't work.
I
You have
think
one captain.
uh-huh.
Oh, I was going to say you have one captain, and obviously the captain can't be the only one on the ship. It'll
Right.
sink then too.
Need a first mate.
You need a first mate. Exactly. And the first mate is just as important as the captain. They just have different roles.
And first mate is a good double
And
meaning too.
yeah, that's true. Hey, yeah, that's a good
Um,
pun.
now I'm a little bit I mean, I do agree with you. Also think, like for me personally, and it's an interesting thing because I never grew up in thinking about gender roles. For me, my whole life has always just been about doing what I want to do, and I never really had a strong compulsion, other than like instinct and things like that. But like, there's a lot of guys that I know where being masculine is the most important thing, and they'll to them, and they will try anything to to be macho and masculine, even if
Mhm.
it doesn't serve their best interests, and even if they're going against
Right.
what they want to do, which I think is that to me is actual toxic masculinity or whatever you want to call it. But
Yep.
uh,
That's a perversion of the natural hierarchy that used to serve us well.
Yes, and for me, like if I'm not in a relationship with anybody, but I feel like I can imagine what I would want in a relationship. And what is
Hmm.
important, and I'm sure you agree, is the balance. I don't necessarily feel like I have to
Yes.
have a specific because we are at a point in our society where sometimes you can't have all the traditional. Not everyone can have like the traditional thing, and I don't feel like I don't want to be the guy that's working all the time, backbreaking labor, and if I have because I have a kid or responsibilities like
Hmm.
that. But I have
Right.
dreams, I have artistic pursuits that I would love to do. Um, but yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but
It's okay. It's okay. It's a quagmire, this whole feminism thing. I feel like part of the intention is for it to be a quagmire because you get in it, you're like, okay, we're going to tackle this. And before you know it, you're like, holy, it's confusing. They change the meanings, they change, everything's contradictory. There's so much cognitive dissonance going on. This whole a woman can do anything a man can do. Okay, my fiance is 6'4" and about 200 and something pounds, right? Who I don't want if he's in a burning building, I don't want a little woman coming to rescue him. She
Right.
can't carry him on her back.
Unless she's like one of those
Let's be
Amazon women that
honest.
are like 10 feet tall.
Yeah, she'd have to be like, what's her name? Ronda Rousey or whatever
Rousey,
her name
one of those
is, the
female
MMA
bodybuilders.
Rousey. Yeah, like she can go rescue him maybe, but we've got to be real about men and women. We are different. We are biologically different.
Yes.
We're made different. Our brains are different, and it's not bad. But this whole equal thing, it seems to me they're trying to merge the words equal and same together. And this doesn't just go for, the sexes, but it's across the board. They're trying to make it so that whatever he can do, I can do, and whatever he has, I should have, unless it's something ill. Because they talk about STEM, the STEM fields. We need more women in the STEM fields. No, look, I went to Purdue University. I think you're from the Midwest, right?
From Southwest. I'm from Texas.
Oh, okay, Texas. All right, never mind. It's in the middle of the country. But yes, I went to Purdue University in Indiana, and it was an engineering. It's an engineering university. There weren't, I didn't go for engineering. There weren't very many girls in the engineering classes. Now, was that because they weren't allowed?
No.
No. Why was it? Women are not interested in it. Jordan Peterson always says men are more interested in things and women are more interested in people. And
Yeah.
that's why we choose different degrees we have. And my point that I was kind of getting off track is that we don't talk about, well, there's not enough female coal miners.
Right.
We got, like, there's not enough women on the oil rigs. What's going on with that? Like the dangerous jobs that men get killed
Yeah.
doing?
Why do you think that is? It's
Where's
because they
where's
don't
the
want to do
information
those
for
things.
that?
They can if they want to.
Exactly.
You can do that.
Right?
That's
Yeah.
perfectly,
Go
you have that
be a coal
opportunity
miner.
by all means.
Yeah. So if you think there should be more women represented in this field or that field, well, how come you get to pick and choose which fields? How about there are more men in jail? Should we try to get more women in jail? And I'm borrowing some of this from a debate that Dr. Peterson had, not all of it, but the jail part he brought up. I always think of coal mining because my mom and her whole side of the family is they're from Kentucky, and they're not coal miners, but I'm aware, of West Virginia and Eastern Kentucky that there's coal mining, and the dangers of the job and how hard it is, just awful. It's just one of the things I
Oh,
would
I can imagine.
least want to do, you know. But nobody's throwing a fit because their women are not equally represented in coal mining. We need to show women examples of coal miners so they know that's something they can become. And okay, I'm sorry, I'll say one more thing and I'll stop ranting about this. But when they say we need to show women, we need to show little girls more women in the STEM field so they'll know that they can become that. I'm sorry. That's so insulting. Are women, are little girls that stupid that they're like, well, I guess I can't do it because they never saw a woman doing it? That's bullshit. Snot.
You can say that word. But and one thing that people don't talk about is the fields that are dominated by women. You don't see a lot of men doing.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is like
Right.
for instance, when I was a teenager, like I would have loved to have been like a babysitter or something. I think that would have been fun. I mean, I love kids, but
Right.
men
Oh, but you can't. You're a
get
man. You're
frowned
vigorous.
upon. It's like a guy. I've had people accuse me of being like, oh, I think why is this guy like kids so much? It's just like it's sickening. It's honestly sickening to be a paternal, nurturing man, and actually
Mm-hmm.
men avoid children a lot of the times, and it's not because they
Mm-hmm.
just naturally don't like kids. I think men are largely
Right.
programmed to love kids, um, on average as much as
Yes.
women. men want to provide, they want to
Yes.
be influential, and I've done plays with children, and it was
Oh.
some of the most amazing experiences that I've had because I
Mhm.
love entertaining kids. I love making kids laugh, and I love kind of being a kid with, with the kids. And
Mhm.
luckily, I've been in situations where that was
Mhm.
okay, and actually, like, the parents were like, "Oh, I'm so happy that, my child got to do this show with you because, they just adore you." But I've
Mhm.
also been in situations where
Mhm.
people are just like, "What's wrong with this guy? Why is this guy like kids so much? Like, is he like a pedophile?" And it
Right.
just even the idea of it, even when
Yeah,
people do it
immediately they'll
jokingly.
get spooky.
Yeah, it's just like,
Yeah. It's not okay. Yeah, you guys are all guilty until proven innocent.
well, it's just like my
I mean,
dad. My dad is a teacher.
oh,
He was a teacher for many years, and he went to
mm,
worked at a school where he was kind of a minority. There weren't as many male teachers, and there were
mhm,
students, parents who did not want their
mhm.
kids in his class because he was a man, despite the
Tell
fact
me
that,
that's not discrimination.
yeah, exactly. And let me tell you something, the
That
kids
is
that were in my dad's class, they were happy. I've even had
Mhm,
people like years down the line say, like some of my classmates, like even in high school, because my dad taught fourth grade. And
mhm.
when I was in high school,
Oh,
kids that I knew who, had him as their teacher, fourth grade, always said he was my favorite teacher. No other teacher compared, and it's just like
right.
sickening.
Wow. That happens so often. Could you imagine if it were the other way around? Like, "Oh, this teacher's a woman. I don't want my kid to have a teacher that's a woman." You'd be on the news.
Yeah,
Somebody
exactly.
would lose their job. Like, that is flat out sexist discrimination. And everybody's fine with it. Actually, I have a similar thing, and it just happened fairly recently. So I'm not sure if you saw in any of my videos, but I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 20 years ago, and I do physical therapy. And my first day at this physical therapy place, you have a physical therapist, but then you have a tech that basically runs through the exercises with you and sort of helps you in between if you need it. So my tech was male. That's fine. And but the thing was is that having MS, and I was really weak when I started PT, I needed a little more help, sort of, getting the things out that I needed to use that he showed me, or I needed a chair to rest in between. And it was just really hard to get his attention. He didn't check in on me, that kind of a thing. And I thought, I don't know that this tech is the right one for me. They have a lot of them, but like he's not as attentive. You know what I mean? And
Right.
that's okay. It's just not his style. So I spoke to somebody in the front, like, hey, is there any way, because there was another one that I had met named Erica. And I said, does Erica work when does Erica work? I wonder if I could switch. So anyway, I got back to my actual physical therapist that I was interested in switching um, techs. It's a very long story. Sorry for how long it is.
No, no, by
But
all means. I have my own
the
story.
assumption, yeah, the automatic assumption was that I wanted to switch to a female. And the reason I wanted to switch had nothing to do with the fact that he was a male, and had everything to do with the fact that I felt like I needed somebody who maybe had a little more time, wasn't dealing with as many patients at a time, whatever. But immediately, and so being who I am, the moment I realized that was what they thought, I gently set them straight and said, no, 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 that's not what it is. Because I didn't want them to think, oh, well, there's another one.
Right, yeah. And
But
and
it
there's a
told me
reason why they
also
would.
that must happen a lot there too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. I remember one time when I was in,
it's
high school, I took a, yoga class, and, the reason I took a
mm-hmm,
yoga I needed 1, semester credit, and then I was done with my P because I was terrible with PE, I hated PE, not a sports guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, yoga
Mm-hmm.
sounds like something that I could enjoy doing for a semester. And
Sure.
I
Yeah.
started taking the yoga class. Turns out I'm the only male in the class. And
Oh, of
I and
course.
I was we had like designated places that we sat, even though it was in the gym, and I was in the back behind everybody. And when we were
Mm-hmm.
doing, then the instructor, the teacher, she would do her like, her yoga moves, the warrior position, downward dog, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, I start getting
Yeah.
these girls looking at me like judging, like with these judging eyes, like don't look at me. And I'm just like, I'm looking at the teacher. And like I've had, they were like, they would like pull their shirt down, as if they're trying to avoid me like staring at them and stuff like that.
Right.
And I'm just like, I don't want to
Because
stare
I'm
at you
sure
guys.
that's why you went in there. That's what they thought, though. They thought you joined the class just to be a creepy perv.
Yeah.
And feminism primed them to think that way. And it couldn't have been further from the truth.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's these girls, here's what you know, I just wish I could say to every woman that you can at least sort of talk to, because you can't talk to all of them, as you know.
Hmm.
Like, I'm sorry, but we were all lied to. We were all lied to. Feminism has lied to us women to to disrupt the nuclear family, to emasculate men,
And to
to
divide
get
men and
two
women.
people in households paying taxes. Yeah,
That's the biggest thing. It's like I
with
want
women in the
everybody to get
workforce.
along. I want
Yeah,
everybody to be together. And
right.
and whenever people just automatically assume that something is sexist, it's like, and I've mentioned this several times before, and I don't want to keep harping on it. But what got me in trouble and kind of got me kind of ostracized from the group that I was in, um,
Hmm.
is because I made some completely unrelated to the group statements that were
Yeah.
relatively true, which were just about double standards. And men are often perceived as shallow, especially the ones that say, oh, I don't want to date this type of girl, like a girl who is overweight. That was the specific thing I was talking about, a girl who is overweight. And there are
Yeah.
a lot of guys that will date girls that are overweight. They're not really hurting. It's not hurting anything because there are many guys that are fine with that.
No.
That's what they're attracted to. But it's also perfectly understandable why a guy wouldn't be, because it's all about health and vitality and fertility
Most
and being
most guys
overweight.
don't want that.
Yeah. And guys often get called shallow and superficial because of that. And yet, at the same time, people see no issue with a woman saying, oh, a guy's got to be this height. The guy can't be
Right.
balding or something like that. Even though being overweight is something that you can control. Maybe won't get the
Right.
exact size that you want, but if you, eat right and you exercise,
Mhm.
uh, then
Yes.
you won't be like gargantuan. You won't be like a whale.
Right.
But
You're absolutely
height,
right.
height and hair. I mean, unless you can get a hair transplant, um,
Right.
you wear like platform
You
shoes.
can't control that.
It's natural
Right.
and it's fine if that's your preference too. I'm not saying that it's necessarily like you're a bad person if you have that preference, but I think you should be a little bit lenient, But it's just that double standard. But of course,
Well, there
everybody
definitely
was
should be
coming
a
out
double
saying I
standard.
was
Yeah.
misogynist and I hate women, and um, I often get told that, by people. There are people who
Well,
think that I'm like the biggest sexist in the world. And it's like, no, if you actually know me personally, you'll know that I love women.
mhm,
I love strong women. I love women who are empowered.
mhm,
But I don't think that being empowered should mean that you oppress somebody else. It's demasculating somebody else,
correct.
oppressing somebody else in the name of being
Yes.
empowered is not true empowerment. And I don't believe in being an empowered woman
No, it is
or an
not.
empowered man, but an empowered person, an individual. That's when I meet people, I don't make those kinds of assumptions. I just, I mean, I do make some assumptions sometimes, but but not anything like, oh, this girl's a woman. I'm gonna
Like most
automatically
do.
assume something about her. I'm gonna judge her. It's like, no, it's like I don't understand the
Right.
guys that say men and women can't be friends. I kind of understand the notion, the idea of that, but I don't really see that. I think
Mhm.
that men and women can be friends. I have many female friends, and it doesn't have to be sexual. And even if someone is attracted to the other, and you can still be friends, but you have to manage it. It is difficult, but I kind of understand what they
It's
say.
a tricky subject.
Yeah, but you can be
It's a tricky
platonic.
subject, the whole friendship thing. You can be platonic. I think it depends on your age and stage of life. Um, I do not keep male friends because because of my situation with my fiance, and he does not have female friends. It's not to say we don't have acquaintances and people that we know, but I'm not going to be, Facebook messaging a male. I'm not going to be having a phone conversation with a male.
Mhm.
It's just, in my opinion, it's inappropriate because it's outside of the union that my fiance and I have. And it may be quite innocuous, but where it can lead is the problem. Because if you're in a relationship and you have, especially this is a problem with girls, men are better at compartmentalizing. But if, let's say you've got a friend who's a girl and she's in a relationship and he does something and she's just angry with him. And so she decides, she's going to tell you all about it and cry to you. It's not appropriate, if that's her husband, for her to be sharing all those inner details. And if you were a different sort of man, you may see an opportunity
Yeah.
and think, oh, okay, here's my time with her. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, and
Because
that
I think that you've got a very different perspective. And I know that your channel's called the theatric dyspraxic, right?
yes.
I can't even say it right. Okay.
A lot of
So
people have a hard time.
that was a challenge that you had to face. Do you still have to face challenges due to that?
Yes.
Sorry, it's a personal question.
No, yeah.
Okay.
I
So
don't mind
me
talking
having
about it. It's just a
MS,
different topic.
I figured yeah. But the thing is when we have these sorts of physical things, challenges, it does kind of separate us from the rest of everybody
Mhm.
and allows us to almost observe objectively a little bit easier. Um, and so you are very different than most men. A lot of men
Mhm.
might see an opportunity in that, she's having issues with her
Oh,
with
yeah.
her
Oh, trust me, I know.
husband or whatever,
I
and vice
definitely
versa, and vice versa. Yeah. So
actually, I
so
was that
that's where,
guy.
it's too easy for infidelity to happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
This
yeah. Well,
brings
there
up
you
an
go.
interesting story I'll tell in a minute, but I'll let you finish first.
Oh, I think I was done with that.
Oh, okay. Not to cut
Thank
you
you.
off or anything. I want you to, be able to finish your
No,
point.
it's fine.
I don't want to
I
mansplain.
get it.
Uh, uh,
Oh, I would never accuse you of doing
no, but you know what you're talking about though, because what I was talking about as far as like men and women being friends, I was largely talking about like being single. But even like when I talk about, because that also brings the question of like what kind of friends? Is it a private friendship? Like I totally agree
Sure.
with you 100%. Like if you're texting somebody in private and you're not really letting your partner into that whole thing, then yeah, that's definitely a
Right.
no-no. Um, but
Yeah.
like say you and your fiance are friends with another man, and you're not going to see
Right.
this other man by yourself alone and privately,
Right.
but I actually had an experience
Sure.
one
It's
one
a
time.
totally different story.
I had an experience one time where, and I'm not going to go into too much detail because it is kind of a long story. I've actually written about it in a blog that I haven't posted yet, but will. But there was one time a few years ago where I had these friends. I'm not going to say their names, obviously, but they I met them through the theater, and one of them they were engaged at the time. They've since split up, and I'll get into that a little bit. But they were engaged at the time; they were going to get married, and I was friends with both of them. And the girl in the relationship, she decided that she wanted to set me up with one of her bridesmaids and one of her friends. And she was basically saying, I think you guys would be great together. But it turns out that the girl that she was talking about was in a relationship with another guy. And I'm just immediately like,
Oh,
I'm not gonna touch that. But I was open to the idea of friendship with this girl. I was like, look, obviously you think that we get along. I'm not gonna try and date this girl.
mhm,
But I'll be
mhm,
friends with anybody. So I started talking to this
mhm,
girl, and we were chatting back and forth, and we became good friends. We got along really well. Yada yada yada. She was starting to hang out with me and our friends. And anyway, my friend kept saying, "You got to make a move on this girl," and I was like, "She's in a relationship. It's just wrong." And basically, over
right.
time, it's a little complicated, but like I did end up making a move on her with the foolish idea that she was going to break up with the boyfriend because they were having serious issues in the relationship. She was talking to me about it. Um, about her problems with her
Mhm,
boyfriend, how she wanted to end things, but she
mhm,
was scared. And my friend kept saying, she wants to be with you, but she's scared to leave her relationship unless she knows how you really feel, and all that kind of nonsense. And we
monkey branching.
and we ended up like kissing and all that kind of stuff. Didn't really go any further than that,
Mhm,
but the moment that I realized that, of course, and I even expected this, but I guess I wanted to think could be wrong. But
right.
she did not break up with the guy. So I said, okay,
Mhm,
well, I'm not going to associate with you anymore. And she was like, she begged me to kind of stay in her life. And so
mhm,
we hung out a couple of times, but she was always trying to move things further and basically trying to have us
mhm.
both. And I ended up
Yes,
eventually just
you were
breaking.
the backup.
I was the backup and
Yeah,
the next
yeah.
in line. But the interesting thing about this story, so I ended up putting a stop to that. I cut ties with this girl forever, and my friend even felt like I did something wrong. Like, oh, it could have been something special, and it's like no. And she was basically justifying the
Mhm.
fact that her friend was cheating on this guy with me,
Yeah,
and basically justifying it's like, well, he's an asshole and things like that. It's like, well, that doesn't matter. I don't care if I don't care if he's an asshole. If he's an asshole, then break up with him. If you want to be with me, you can be with
yeah.
me. Don't cheat on some. And the thing is, like people will say,
Mhm.
if she's gonna do it to him, she's gonna do it to you. And I knew that, which is why I just didn't allow it to go any
Because
further.
that's her morals.
But what's funny
The
about this?
fact that she uses moral relativism tells you everything you need to know. It's okay to do it because this. No, wrong is wrong and right is right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Exactly. And but what's funny about this story, so you know how my friend was just like she was very casual and
Mhm,
very accommodating towards what this girl was doing. She was basically using me and using him, and
mhm,
my friend didn't seem to the issue with that. So fast forward, so
yeah,
they ended up getting married at the end of that year. This was 2017. My friend and I, of course, it was awkward at the wedding because that girl was the bridesmaid, and um, anyway,
yeah.
a year later, less than a year later, actually, I moved away, and I didn't know, but they apparently had gotten divorced. My two friends, and I wasn't friends with her anymore. She and I had like a falling out, but I was still friends with the guy, but we didn't really talk that much. But I
Mhm,
found out through someone else that they had gotten divorced, and I was like, oh, what happened? They weren't even together for a year. So I talked to the guy about it, and here's what happened, how the relationship ended. Um, they had this other friend, also with the theater, and he would sometimes hang out with us, the four of us. And apparently, the wife, the girl who had the friend,
mhm,
apparently she was meeting up with this guy and talking about her problems with her husband and talking about, all sorts of things. They started kissing. It
mhm.
was the same situation that happened with the friend, but she was keeping it secret
Right,
uh, from her husband. But so here's the thing.
right.
He one time went to a party, and he met a girl. He got like wasted, absolutely wasted. This girl started hitting on him. He didn't really quite know what was going on, but next thing he knows,
Yeah.
he wakes up and he had sex with this girl. And
Oh my
he
gosh.
had this one night stand, and he was just like, oh my God, he felt so guilty. He immediately went home and told her all about it, and she
Mm-hmm.
threw a fit, threw him out, and that
Oh
was
yeah.
it. That was the end of the relationship. So it's like, despite the fact that yes, what he did was wrong, but he didn't
Yeah.
really, I'm not justifying exactly what he did, but
It
I
was not. It
would
wasn't
argue that
intentional. So I totally get it. Yeah.
yeah, and I would argue that what she did was kind of worse because she was
Oh yeah.
completely sober at the time. She was in her right mind. She was making all these little decisions, and this guy was kind of like, taken advantage of in a way, and he felt guilty
Yeah.
about it immediately.
Yeah.
So it's just like
Mm-hmm.
that kind of double standards where it's like you're allowed to do that, but he's not allowed to, like, and he shouldn't, but
But yeah.
sometimes things
Yeah.
happen and you make a
Look at
bad
what a mess it
decision.
all made. Yeah.
But whenever it's meticulous and you're going out of your way to, like, oh, I'm gonna go to the store real quick, and then you meet up with a friend of theirs, a mutual friend.
Right.
Um, Before I close
Yeah.
out this interview, one of the interesting things I think, I have an interesting perspective on gender and sort of female privilege because I grew up with a twin sister, and my sister and I
Oh.
don't want to like sound like I'm saying anything bad about her, because what I'm talking about is not anything that she did wrong or anything like that. It's just the nature of her
Right.
life, as opposed in the nature of my life, and just
Right.
I've noticed the differences.
It's a reflection of society, not her character.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the way.
It's society. It's not her character. It's what society has done and how they've lied to us. And you're about to tell me how that manifested, I think.
Yes, and I've noticed certain advantages that she's had and disadvantages, and the other way around. And I'm
Mhm.
sure she could speak to some of the ways that maybe things that I had a little bit easier than she did. There definitely in certain areas was less pressure, especially since she was the only girl in the family. And so of course, there was a lot of pressure to act
Mhm.
feminine, and of course she acted out as a teenager, kind of became a tomboy because of that, because
Mhm.
of she was always dressed as girls and always
Mhm.
having people reinforce her femininity. And one example that I can give,
Yeah.
as far as one of the things I didn't have to deal with, but she kind of did because of society. Um, I remember we shared a room up until the age of 12, and then my brother moved out, and of course by that point we just could not share the same room anymore. We were at that age where it's like she needed her own space,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I was just in the way. Um,
Yeah.
so my brother had just graduated high school and he moved out. So I moved into his room, which was next door, and with like the room over. And but he ended up having to move back in with us. So I ended up having to share a room with him. But I remember in high school when I shared a room with my brother, our room was connected to like the one of the bathrooms, the bathroom that had the shower. And I remember like every morning at like 4 in the morning, uh, the bathroom light would come on, the shower would start going, and I'd be woken up, and it's my sister taking a shower, and she'd be in the shower for a long time, and then she would get out of the shower, she'd be in there for like an hour, be like 5 in the morning, and then
Mhm.
she would start doing her hair, and anyway, I'd fall back asleep, and then I'd be woken up an hour later by my
Mhm.
dad because we had to get ready, and she would still be doing her hair, and then she would go in her room and start doing her makeup and start finding the right
Yeah.
clothes to wear. There's just so many things that she had to
Yeah.
do, and we always ended up still being late because despite the fact that she would get up at 4 in the morning just to get ready, it took her so long because there were so many things that she had to do,
Yeah.
and I didn't have to do any
Yeah.
of that. Like I could have just like woken up, threw something
Right.
on, and I mean I probably should have taken better care of grooming myself. Uh, but that's an example of
But even that,
one
it
of the
doesn't take near. Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't take as much time, and technically she didn't have to do that, but there would have been people at school, like it's understandable why she'd be like self-conscious, So there's that.
Of
So that's an
course.
example of like an advantage that I had that she didn't have, where she had to
Right.
worry more because I think people and specifically, and this is something people don't talk about much. A lot of women judge other women. It's just a big problem, and that's
Always.
a
Yeah,
lot of times when
I
girls
do.
dress to, they try to look their best. It's not necessarily just for the sake of men, but it's also to impress other women who are going to judge them if they don't look their best. It's just and that's the thing. It's like
Well,
women.
that's kind of how we do our hierarchy.
Hmm.
That's how us women do our hierarchy, per se. I mean, very few will admit it, but yeah, to stay thin, have our hair, colored right, styled right, makeup just so. You sort of develop your hierarchy based on that. Females do. Because what is it? What were we, you know, for ages and ages, historically, what are we competing for? What is the hierarchy for? To compete for the best man. This is the same
Right.
reason why men are competitive at sport and being strong and having the best job. Because is it about the best job? No, it's about attracting the best female.
And those
And
things
see,
are
you don't
harder
have
to
to be
accomplish too.
religious.
Other than
That's science.
you
Yes.
can work on your
Yeah.
you can dress in a bunch, you can put on a bunch of makeup and hide your flaws, you can dress really nice to cover up your insecurities,
Mm-hmm.
but the things that often men are
Mm-hmm.
insecure about, it's really hard to overcome that and to achieve the things, like it's
Sure.
all about your confidence. Well, if a guy suffers from mental illness, something that people
Right.
largely ignore, then it's really hard
Sure.
for him to be confident. It's real hard for him to
Absolutely.
be that kind of self-assured kind of guy. And that brings to another point that I've noticed a difference between
Right.
her and I, my sister and I, is we both have had our struggles with mental health, and we both have had, if engaged in things that
Mm-hmm.
probably were that I definitely see now as just not healthy, which often included like
Sure.
posting about it online or venting too much, and that's
Mm-hmm.
a problem that we both have consistently had a problem
Mm-hmm.
with. And I try to do it less these obviously, but it used to be a real big problem. And there's a reason for that. Social media, that's a whole other thing. Um, but I've noticed that
Mm-hmm.
anytime I was struggling with something, uh, most people just did not care, even if it was. And the things, like we talk about like
Yeah.
dyspraxia, and I'm writing a book about my experiences with dyspraxia and other things that I went through throughout my life,
Mm-hmm.
because I was going through serious things, and I'm not saying that my
Mm-hmm.
sister wasn't, um, but she had more of a support system in place than I did. She wasn't judged by
Right.
people for being
That,
depressed or
yeah.
going through anxiety. Every time, even if she posts
Right.
anything, even like vaguely, sad or whatever, she'll get like dozens of comments from people and messages from people's, and she was always having people lining up to try and make her happy. And a lot of guys, they like that flawed kind of girl, that girl that, a lot of guys gravitate towards the depressed girl
Mm-hmm.
'cause maybe
The
it,
damsel in
they'll be
distress.
easier.
It's the
um
damsel in distress.
yeah, exactly. And that's, I think, an issue that I hate seeing guys that constantly simp for girls. And I understand they want to be that guy that makes them happy and saves
Right.
them, but you can't. And you're just kind of making,
No.
you're embarrassing yourself.
Because then you're always going to be responsible for her happiness. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And
And
you've
it's
put
not
yourself in the
attractive.
role of I'm here to make you happy today, and you can do that.
And it's also not attractive. Most women, whether they admit it or not, most women aren't attracted to those kind of guys that they're going to do everything for you. They're never going to take charge. Men like women largely like a
You're
guy
right.
that will take charge and be himself. And regardless of how I feel about myself sometimes, like I at least try my best to, I will do what I want to do, what I think is right for myself. And I'm not going to have somebody else control me because of it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like, and this is something I've actually recently, just the other day, had a lot of women attack me for is I made a point, which is that whenever a woman, oftentimes, and this isn't true for everybody, but a lot of the times I've seen it, a lot of the times, this is observation, experiences of men and women, more often than not, when a woman gets out of a relationship, she can move on to the next guy immediately. That doesn't mean she always will. Some of them choose
Immediate.
to take times off, but she has that opportunity. If something doesn't work out,
Yeah,
there's
she does.
always another guy around the corner that she can just choose. And, and no matter how desperate he is. And guys don't typically have that option. There are some guys that do, but a lot of guys, it's like a relationship is over, then we're single for a while. I mean, I haven't been in a relationship for 2 years, Um, it's hard. It is really hard for men in the dating pool. Women have all the privileges when it comes to dating. I don't know if I can
They
think
do.
of really any privileges that men have when it comes to dating, when it comes other than the fact that we don't have to deal with as many
They
creeps.
don't. They
That's the only thing. There are a lot of creepy guys, and that
don't.
must suck.
Yeah, well, but how do you know there are a lot of creepy guys?
Well, I know a lot of women who deal with a lot
Anecdotally,
of creeps.
from
Yeah,
people telling
anecdotally.
you.
And I've seen guys
Yeah.
kind of be
And the
creeps as well.
creepy guys, you know, well, they sometimes there's a creepy guy here and there because sometimes people suck. And it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that he's a guy. But here's how women makes me mad. Women call guys creepy if they hit on them and they're not attractive. Think
That's
of 50
true.
Shades of Grey. You familiar with that?
A little bit, yeah.
If
I know.
Christian Grey hadn't have been ridiculously wealthy, you know what I'm going to say? Yeah.
Yeah.
Ridiculously wealthy and good looking, that
6 feet
guy
tall,
is
tall,
like
dark, and
a
handsome.
serial something or other. Yeah. Talk about creepy, you know? So it's basically just if she doesn't find him attractive, it's creepy. Because if whatever that guy had said that was so called creepy had been drop dead gorgeous and six whatever and muscly, I bet she wouldn't have called him creepy.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think the kind of guys I was thinking of is more like the
So,
guys that'll send like the dick pics or those types of things. But no, that is absolute true point. A lot of
well,
women
yeah,
will say that
that
I deal with so many creeps.
that's a mentally ill person who does that.
Yeah. And there's also reasons why that is. It's because
Any
men are,
person
are
who's going to send
conditioned to
you
be the
pictures,
guy. You're
yeah,
supposed to make the first move. So obviously there's going to be more men that do make the first move, but
yeah,
they're not really taught how to do that because women are confusing when it comes to that kind of stuff. It's really hard to tell what
that's
a woman
right.
wants you to
Yes,
do to kind of impress her. And there's so much pressure on men
right,
to be the ones to impress. That's why I don't really date that much because I'm not trying to impress anybody. But
right.
because I'm not competing with all these other guys, it's just
I
like
get it.
I get thrown to the wayside and you deal with the loneliness more and all that kind of but you should
Right.
you should be happy. You should learn to be happy. Or at least content by yourself so you can work on yourself. And that's another thing a lot of women don't do is they don't work on themselves. They
Mm-hmm.
get out of a relationship with a guy and then they move on to the next one. And
Ooh,
it's just this endless cycle where
yeah.
they don't examine themselves
Mhm.
because they're not alone. They're not ever alone enough to be able to
They
do.
don't know they're the common, yeah.
I mean, that's
They're always with guys and they always have problems with these guys and they're the common denominator. And they never think, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm choosing the wrong type for myself. Maybe I'm being too choosy. Maybe I am a brat. And that's why they keep leaving. They don't pause to take a breath to analyze where is their ownership in it.
exactly. It's that accountability. The thing that always go back to is just that
Accountability
they don't
comes
want to take
back to that.
accountability
That's
for their
right.
own behavior and they don't want to question like these women who think
Mhm.
that, everywhere that they can't find a good guy, they can't find they can't everybody harasses them and stuff. They don't ever examine like, well, what do you do to get yourself in that position? And I don't want to talk
Sure.
about like I don't want to feel like I'm shaming anybody that's been a victim of sexual assault. But like we were talking about earlier, you can't help but ask, like, well,
Mhm.
what happened? How did that situation occur. It doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily mean it's your fault. It's just
Right.
like, what were the circumstances that put you in that position? Because it's not as simple as just saying that guys rape you everywhere you go. That's not true. It isn't a reality that
That's
we live in,
correct.
that a woman can't go anywhere without
I
being
totally
sexually
agree with you.
assaulted. And there's these people who say that we live in a rape culture as
It's
if
yeah.
everybody tolerates rape. Everybody, like, if you go out in a public place and a man starts raping a woman, people are going to put a stop to it. Nobody's going to tolerate that. Nobody's going to be
Yes.
okay with that and just let it happen,
Yeah.
and usually in these
Yeah.
cases where a man rapes
I
a
know.
woman, it's usually someone that she knows, and they're usually alone. It you know
Mhm.
some and some and maybe
Mhm. And
sometimes.
it's usually, they're sort of on a date, and maybe, and I think, and I'm gonna say it, I'm a woman, I can get away with a little more. Um, I, a lot of times I think it's regret sex.
Yeah, that
You
is
know,
definitely something that I think
Th-
happens a
they're
lot.
like, I don't know if I was all the way into that. I think he sort of pressured me. I think he convinced me. Well, we used to call that seduction.
Yeah,
That used to be part of it. And are you so stupid that you can't go, oh, yeah, I don't want to do this?
yeah.
I mean, it's
or
really an insult to women to say, well,
or even
she was
afterwards, you
pressured and he convinced her. And
Yeah, it's like even
yeah,
afterwards when you do have that
it's
encounter
ridiculous.
and then you regret it, it's like, why can't you just be like, "Oh, well, that was a bad decision. That was a stupid
Mhm.
thing I did. I kind of wish I didn't do that." Why
Yeah,
does it have to be like the
right,
guy may not know. There are a lot of guys that they may not know, because it
right.
isn't as simple as saying
They
like
don't
no
know.
means no, because they, sometimes it's
Mhm.
not clear. That's why women need, if and I
No,
can't
of
speak from personal
course not.
experience because I always make sure, but sometimes in seduction, sometimes,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
just doesn't come up to just
Hmm.
stop and say, "Do you consent to do this?" You're not sex isn't like a
Yeah,
bureaucratic thing. Sometimes,
right.
it's all about what happens naturally,
No, it shouldn't be.
go with the flow, and, I think that women should be clear, obviously, if the answer is no, and guys should respect that, obviously. Um, but, you have to understand that
Hmm.
sometimes
And I
people
think for the
say
most
no,
part,
and,
they do.
it's complicated. There's variables to these types of things, and people just muddy it and make it, like, too simple, black and white.
That's why I'm so old-fashioned. That's why I'm so old-fashioned with I just don't think there's a lot to gain in dating just to date. And I don't think there's a lot I think there is a lot to gain if you're, say in your early 20s or what have you, and your parents help choose, you know, certain men that they think might be a good match for you.
Mhm.
I know that sounds completely backwards, and I'm not saying they get to pick who you marry and force you, but listen, as a woman, I can tell you, we are not good at picking a good man when we are in our teens and our early 20s. We pick losers,
I think it's good to, have
and we need.
experiences and
Mhm.
have those types of relationships just to kind of figure out, like, it's almost like practice, but you gotta be responsible and you have to be
Yeah, but you get
careful.
hurt and traumatized.
Yeah.
You get hurt and traumatized in the, sort of dating and that kind of thing. It's and then your ability to trust is, chipped away at. The dangers are more there if you're out there and you're a woman and you're dating and say there are rapists, well, you're out there. I think, all the protections that we used to have for women where they were sort of under the protection of and guidance of their fathers in their late teens and early 20s, not shipped off to some school where it's basically, you know, a party and an orgy and, do whatever feels good. Because that's what 18-year-olds are going to do when you ship them off to go live with each other.
Right.
But anyway, that's a whole different deal. Um, but fathers should be the gatekeepers of
Well,
their daughters.
it's a common thing in Japan. I know
So
that
they go, no, no,
there's a
yeah,
lot of,
no,
like, it's not arranged
right,
marriages, but it's like, "Oh, I'm going to go,
correct.
meet this guy," and that my father's introducing me to.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's a common thing, and
Right.
they still are allowed to
Yeah.
make the final choice.
It worked.
But it can
Sure.
definitely work. Maybe not for everybody, but it's a good way to meet people. First of all, you might meet, you might as well meet the person
Right.
at least.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe in arranged marriages for
You're
sure,
more
but
likely.
I don't see a way
I
how
don't
that would
believe in
hurt
that either.
to,
But
yeah.
I do believe in the father. You were saying, nobody teaches you how to, how are you supposed to tell a woman that you're interested in? Well, it used to be that your father would teach you how to do that by talking to you. And it was sort of, there were clear cut ways and classy ways to do so. And on the other hand, women, the daughters of the fathers, were, there was a gate. So you would basically approach the father of some girl you wanted to date and say, hello, Mr. So and so, I'm really interested in dating your daughter.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And he can be like, you know, and if you're up to no good, you're not going to go up to the dad and ask that. So it's already weeded out a ton of people. Not to mention, it encourages the younger men to grow up and be, you know, stand up guys. Because otherwise, they're never going to get a woman.
Yeah, and if you're the kind of
And now you look around, I don't know your age, but look at the 20-year-old guys around.
yeah.
you know,
Um
it's probably much better. I mean, right now I'm living somewhere where, yeah, they're not worth a whole lot, but
oh no,
they don't have a lot of skills. They don't have a,
no.
you know,
Well, they're being
they don't know how to
discouraged.
be a gentleman.
Yeah, they're being discouraged because I mean, a part of
Correct.
social situations is a lot of trial and error. And whenever there's like so many reasons now that guys see that makes us see that it's not worth it. It's not worth even talking to these girls. And I'm not saying it isn't. I think it is worth it because
Yep.
it leads to great things. But it's almost like that's the message that men are being received, and women are also being received. The other thing is that
Mm-hmm.
it's not worth even trying to date a guy because he's just going to rape you, or he's just going to murder you, he's just going to hurt you, and
Right.
you're going to
Too
be
dangerous.
in danger.
Yeah.
Every guy is a threat, and that's not true. And I know you have too. There are a lot of amazing men, and there's a lot of amazing women.
Well,
Most of the women that I know that
mm-hmm.
I think are amazing and I think are empowering, strong women are not usually feminists. And the women that I know that usually call themselves feminists, a lot of them are very damaged. They're very broken. They have a lot of
Yes.
emotional issues
Yes.
and mental illness. Um,
Yes.
and whenever
Yes.
you're like
I
that, you
agree.
have no control, and you're blaming everything on a patriarchy, and you're hostile towards men,
Mm-hmm.
and you use your sexual assault
Mm-hmm.
experiences almost like a badge of honor in a way. You're shoehorning it into
Yes.
you're using it to win arguments and stuff like that. That is, you're not a match
Sure.
for anybody,
Sure.
and you're only going to live a life
Mm-mm.
of unhappiness. And so I don't worry too much about those people. I mean, I kind of feel bad for them, but they kind of dig their own graves, and if they just take accountability
They
for
don't seek
themselves.
help. Being a victim too
Exactly. They
quickly.
don't examine the
Right.
true issues. They don't want to accept the reality. They live in denial, and they always want to push the blame, and they just have to
Right.
play the victim. They just have to play the victim. And that's true with some of the
Totally.
people that I've
Yeah.
encountered, the people like the person who wrote about me in their blog, just a constant victimization and
Mm-hmm.
skewing the facts, painting people to look worse than they are. And all this does is just
Right.
push women and men away from each other. And that's why men and women don't get along anymore. And that's why I love
Right.
meeting women who
That's
who
true.
are sick of it, sick of what feminism does. Um, and I understand
Right.
that some people use feminism and they try to use it for good, and they don't necessarily agree with some of the things. But you have to understand that whenever there's a group and there's so many people in this group that are just toxic and are using the group to do terrible things, then
Mhm.
maybe at that point it's best
Mhm.
to just distance yourself from that group and call yourself an egalitarian or call yourself something else, you know? So you're a champion for human rights.
Yeah,
Uh,
something else and yeah.
yeah.
And you were just saying it was pushing men and women apart, and my thought was, yes, and so you don't have to break up the family if you don't even if you can get them to not start in the first place. And, a statistic that I find interesting is that right now well, 19, goodness gracious, 2019, I didn't do 2020 because I was like, that was COVID and lockdowns, and so
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of people didn't get married in 2020. So 2019, for every 1,000 people, 35 were married, right? And just a decade ago, sorry, that's 33. I can't read my own writing.
You're talking about, like, adult
33 were married out of that last year.
is it like,
And then
out of 1,000 adults?
2010, yeah, 1,000 adults, yeah.
Oh, okay.
1,000 adults, 35 people are married in 2019, 33, sorry, in 2019. In 2010, 10 years ago, it's not that different, but it was a little bit more. 35 out of 1,000 people were married. The marriage rate is going down. Also, check this action out. In 1970, 86 out of 1,000 people were married. 86.
Hmm. That is definitely a lot more.
So 30, 40 years. Yeah, in 40 years, it went from 86 down to 35.
Wow. And,
And
you
I
know
think largely because,
mhm.
they men and women are in situations where they don't think they need each other anymore.
And also they feel like it's a detriment to their own well-being and their sense of individuality,
Right.
uh, to get
Right.
married. When that I think a truly successful relationship
Right.
is all about balance, and it's about, like, respecting each other,
Yeah.
accepting each other, understanding that you do have differences, uh, and that you can work those differences out
Sure.
if you communicate, um, but we get
Mhm.
nowhere by just pointing blame all the time. And it's true. I see this
Correct.
on some of the male rights stuff too. That's why I don't call myself like MRA or anything, because there are a lot of guys who kind of do the opposite extreme
Mhm.
of what feminism does. But I don't think they're quite as radical about it. I think it's more quiet, but they still kind of have
Well,
these
they don't have an agenda.
right.
They don't have an agenda, and that makes it different.
It's more of just bit.
And they're not trying to they're it's called red pill rage.
Mhm.
And it's the ones who have had their kids taken away, have been falsely accused, et cetera, et cetera. And right
It's
now they're
understandable.
going through the anger and the hurt from that. And that's a stage that they go through, and they have called it red pill rage. And a lot of the men who do want to step away from women because of just what they've been through and the dangers, or what they've seen their friends or their father go through, um, most of those guys just want to go do their own thing, be left alone, live in a small house, play video games. You know, they've dealt with their you know bitterness or what have you on their own. They didn't post it online, but as always, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So people go, oh, well, they're just as bad as feminists. Well, not really, because they're not trying to impose anything on you, and they're not trying to take anything away from you, and they're not trying to um, they're just angry,
It's
and
it's
and they're
purely
done. They're done.
self-destructive. It's purely self-destructive, whereas feminism, especially radical feminism, is self-destructive and also destructive.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh yeah, it destruct. In my opinion, feminism destructs on every level, and that's what my channel's about. It's about dissecting it and taking a look at, well, how's it affected this aspect of society, or this aspect of people's personality, from the micro to the macro, and
exactly. And
and
if
which things we can actually trace to that, you know, that way of thinking, that it's almost a philosophy by now. It's an undefinable philosophy, but I know that it appears to me, my stance on it is that it is a philosophy of destruction, um, masquerading as some form of, civil rights.
And a lot of people are they're almost brainwashed into thinking that no, we're on the side of justice. We're on the side of equality. But what they say doesn't necessarily reflect their actions. And I am sorry, but I've met far too many people who call themselves feminists who are just toxic people. They're toxic. They're
Hmm.
the kind of people you don't want in
Yes.
your life. They're hostile. They're aggressive. They're bigoted,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
they don't have any shred of self-awareness. They don't take responsibility for themselves. They don't hold themselves accountable
Yeah.
for their own failings and shortcomings. And that's just not a healthy person. And just, let alone, it's not someone you want to associate with, let alone have a relationship with, let alone be the mother of
Hmm.
your child. You know, you just, you don't have a successful, you're not a successful person if you behave that way. And I'm not here to say,
Nobody can have a good relationship with that.
yeah, and I'm not here to say that men are better than women or that there aren't certain things that men, as a society, or on average kind of do that aren't hurtful. There's like I talked about, my view of toxic masculinity, the whole I gotta be macho and be,
Mhm.
stoic. I can't express my emotions. I can't show myself as vulnerable in any way. I get why people are like that, but I don't think that that's necessarily positive. And but that's a whole other thing, and people do focus on that. I mean, I hate when
We
people
should do another
they
show, toxic masculinity.
whenever yeah, exactly. Whenever what gets me is like whenever feminists talk about male issues, the few times that they ever talk about male issues, they still blame them on
Yeah.
men. They still say that, and
Yep.
they don't even want to say that toxic femininity exists, or
Oh no,
part of it
they
is
have no ownership in anything.
they talk about what and I'm not talking about my parents at all, but like uh they talk about like what the father says to the child or what their influence on the child, but they don't talk about the mother and maybe some of the negative things that some mothers do. There are some ideas that are reinforced that are hurtful to both of them. So we could talk about this forever, but I think this is a good place to end it right
Probably.
now. I'll be happy to have you on again in the
Okay.
future. I mean, pretty much every guest I have on, I'll be happy to have on again in the future because there's just so much to dissect when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Sure.
But thank you so much for being on. It's been a
Sure.
very enriching conversation, and it shows me one of the good things, positive takeaways that I take from having conversations like this is it's like, all right, okay, I'm not a misogynist. I don't hate women. And this just shows like, okay, no, it's not
Mhm.
a hatred. It's not a deeply rooted misogyny that makes me like criticize these groups and criticize these things so much because I love women. I don't love every woman. I don't think every woman is an angel, obviously, and neither is every man. But
Right.
there are a lot. We forget that there are a lot of good men and a lot of good women, and most people in general are decent people. It's those ones that are
Right.
just toxic that. But it's important to talk about these things and to start that dialogue and to give a different
Sure.
perspective. So I hope that people who have heard this understand that it's not we're not being hateful. We want the best for our
No.
society. We want the best for our children and
Well,
for each other.
and you and I didn't even agree on everything.
Yeah, we didn't agree
So
on
I
everything.
don't
That's
think you
perfect.
hate me and you don't think
No,
I hate you.
absolutely. And we respect each other's
And we're
point
not
of view.
telling each other how. Right.
You
Right,
know?
exactly. And I feel that I've benefited having this conversation with you, because
Me too.
it's good to have conversations with all people. It's not so good to always talk to people that with whom you do agree with everything.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, I hope people have that same takeaway.
I find
Thank
it
you so
almost
much for having me
problematic
on.
if you only talk to people that agree with you on every single thing. That's why I'm a moderate
Yeah.
politically. That's why I'm in the middle. I'm like,
Yeah.
if I found myself agreeing
Right.
with one side on everything, then I would question my own
Mm,
my own judgment. I'd be like, well, am I being
right.
swayed a certain way? Am I being brainwashed?
Yeah. Are you even thinking for yourself? Yeah. It's where you start to get into the cult mentality. Like, wait, you can't completely align with another person or a certain ideology, because when you start doing that, that just shows you that you're lacking independence in your thinking. So I think that's
Absolutely.
a good thing. And that's a great takeaway as well, you
Absolutely.
know.
So
So, and I think you're not a misogynist. I think you just are interested in truth and you're fascinated by people.
exactly.
That's what I've gotten so
Man
far
or
from
woman, I'm happy
having this discussion.
I'm happy to have fun with people. I don't think that people should feel like they have to walk on eggshells or be afraid of anybody,
Nope.
because there's
No.
so many wonderful people to meet, and you don't want to prevent yourself from meeting good people because of things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the last thing I want to give you the floor to say anything else that you would like to say before we wrap it up here. Um, so
I'm just going to do a shameless plug and say
absolutely.
to go
Plug
to
away.
YouTube and look. Hmm. Yeah, feminism on trial, and there's a slew of videos on different topics. Some you might not think would even be topics that have to do with feminism, or points of view you've never considered before. So I encourage you to go to YouTube and go to my channel, Feminism on Trial.
And subscribe. Would you ever have guests on there, or was it just something you want to do solo?
I probably will. I'm such a beginner right now that, for right now, I'm just kind of getting some of, I'm getting some content established. I've got probably, I don't know, 15, 20 videos up so far. But eventually I think that's the way it will go. Yes.
Well, I'd be happy to come on whenever you
Can't say
do
when.
and talk about this
It'd
stuff further.
be great. I won't forget about you.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
go ahead, go on Feminism on Trial, subscribe, and also subscribe to this,
Mm.
please. I need more subscribers. And if you want to talk about
Yes.
any
My
subject, again,
subscribers should subscribe here.
yes. And I'm happy to have anybody on. I want to give people a platform to talk about, because conversations like this are why I enjoy doing this podcast. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
The Last
that's
Unicorn,
great.
Feminism
Thank
on
you.
Trial. I will have a link in the description as well. So thank you
Okay.
very much. And thank you,
All right.
everybody.
People are going to tease me about this.
I'm sorry.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Oh, I was just joking. People were going to tease me about it.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Because people are silly
Yep. Oh,
and
well,
they pick at everything. So
we've
I just
established that.
get ahead of it just by saying that. But anyway,
Bye
thank you
bye.
so much for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for accepting.
Bye.
Bye bye.